My name's Scott Tibbles. I'm the features writer with the Investing News Network. Today, I'm speaking with Remi Piet, who is Senior Director at America's Market Intelligence. Thank you for joining me, Remi.
Please, Scott, pleasure to be with you as always.
So we'll just dive straight into it. Today, we're here to talk about Latin American politics and mining. And the first country that I'd like to talk about is Ecuador. Ecuador pops up a lot in mining news around the world lately because it has got a lot of projects that are in the development phase and the country could well turn into a future Chile. In fact, it has been noted for its good copper mineralization and how much gold that there is there. Can you just give me a little bit of a rundown on some of the challenges that miners are facing there? We know that SolGold is facing a potential community opposition at Cascabel, and INV Metals has run into trouble with its Loma Larga gold mine.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just to give you a little bit of an historical background on Ecuador, it has become over the last 2 years some kind of a darling jurisdictions for investors. It was not regarded as high on the agenda under the administration of Correa, because Correa was really a little too, let's say, authoritarian and not having any kind of strong support from communities to be able to move forward on a series of projects. And mining had been slowed down with the fact that Kinross had to leave the countries maybe 5 or 6 years ago, sold Fruta del Norte to Lundin, and Fruta del Norte actually, and Lundin did a very good job on Fruta del Norte to be able to pull that property almost at the level of production. And it's supposed to start, producing this year if it hasn't done so already over the last 1 or 2 months. However, what was the key change in Ecuador was the fact that the successor to Correa, Lenin Moreno, supposed to be the heir to the throne on this one, actually moved away from the traditional Correa, AP politics, leftist politics in Ecuador, and moved towards a more, let's say, center-left, even maybe center-right on some aspect, agenda on welcoming foreign investment, especially into the mining sector. That's the reason why you have a series of companies that started moving from early exploration to more intensified exploration up to starting ramping up at feasibility studies in Ecuador. We're talking about a lot of Australian companies, whether you Hancock Minerals, Newcrest, SolGold, all these are present. You also have a series of Canadian companies that are present in Ecuador, but definitely that had become the jurisdiction of choice where more and more companies were to invest.
Mm-hmm.
The negative aspect of the administration from Lenin Moreno is that Lenin Moreno is someone that obviously doesn't have the iron fist of Correa, but he went a little too far in the other direction, meaning that he's very prone to dialogue, but never clearly showing which side of the mining equation is standing. And that has created a lot of support and expectations from the indigenous communities that have ramped up their opposition. A series of the leaders that had been kept in prison under Correa were released, and you have stronger opposition, well-organized opposition from different movements, where the CONAIE, Corunari, which are the two leading associations, indigenous associations in Ecuador, or on the political level, the Pachakutik Indigenous Party, that actually made some strides in the recent elections, the April local elections, where some of their key leaders were elected to the position of prefects. So that's the equivalent of governor in provinces. And so one of them, being Yaku Artambel, is now the prefect of Azuay, which is a strong mining province where IAMGOLD and INV were located in the Loma Larga project, which you already mentioned, and also in the traditional mining province of Zamora Chinchipe or Morona Santiago. In Zamora Chinchipe specifically, you have a Pachakutik dissident that was elected as governor and will be having position are probably less pro-mining that his predecessor called Salvador Quispe that had actually worked in good understanding with Lundin and other companies operating in Zamora Chinchipe. So that's a little bit of the situation in terms of politics over the last years. These, as you were mentioning, culminated into a series of local votes. The first one was against Loma Larga at the same time of the governmental and local elections in March. And this local referendum, was clearly to try to limit the capacity of Loma Larga to operate, especially in an area called the Paramo area. So paramos are areas located between, let's say, around 1,500 meters to 3,000 meters, where most of the water sources are actually originating from. And unfortunately for the mining sector, INV was unable to rally enough support from the communities, and that vote was clearly a resounding no to the development of INV in that specific jurisdiction. That was one key battle that was launched by Yaku Wartembel, the leader of the indigenous communities, who's a very savvy man and lawyer by training, so he tends to litigate on all mining projects. But that has also, and I will summarize my introductory purpose on this, has also led to a wave of local let's say demands for referendum, and the latest one has hit Cascabel, so that large project in the north of the country in Bumbura, held and developed by Sol Gold, with BHP being a large stakeholder, shareholder of the project also. And we are right now at a moment where the Constitutional Court in Ecuador is judging whether or not the request to have a local vote against the development of Cascabel is deemed constitutional. We're actually expecting the answer tomorrow on the 20th of June.
Okay, and so what happens if the ruling is negative? Does Ecuador's potential as a darling mining jurisdiction evaporate?
Well, clearly, the mining community has organized itself and tried to explain the issues to the presidency, and we've seen a series of comments from Lenin Moreno to try to show that he's still supporting mining development in the country. Cascabel, while the mining community probably have not been as organized when the local vote hit ANV in the Loma Larga project a few months past, they are much more organized to try to explain the impact it will have on the overall Ecuadorian economy for the case of Cascabel. Mm-hmm. Cascabel also is not located in the Paramo region, which had clear issues with environmental standards. Cascabel is not having so many issues with, let's say, water sources and so on. So here we're really seeing this spread towards potentially one by one having key projects being hampered by those by those contestations locally. What's happening right now is the decision of the Constitutional Court. What we're seeing is that the Constitutional Court is usually very much divided on those issues, whether it's issues of indigenous rights or other rights. There were a key vote just 2 weeks ago on same-sex marriage. That was 5-4-1 for same-sex marriage, so much more liberal perspective on this. And we're expecting also a 5-4 vote for the Cascabel vote, which probably, and we have to wait until tomorrow, but might actually reject the demand for the referendum to be put together under the current condition, meaning that the wording of it might be considered unconstitutional. But that would actually not prevent from that vote from happening a few weeks down the road, because the idea then would be for the opposing party to mining to just reformulate the question adequately for it to be actually passed and agreed on a local vote. Now, we have to keep, obviously, a lot of precaution, because we're talking about the decision that's supposed to be taken tomorrow. So it's much more reading the tea leaves today.
Okay. And so would the referendum, would they stop these projects in their tracks, or would they simply make them more difficult to go forward?
Well, they technically they would stop them to move forward. I mean, in the case of Loma Larga, it stopped them in a specific district. So there's other opportunities to develop mining with accessing water sources in a neighboring district. So that's another way, but seriously hampers the capacity of that project to move forward. In the case of Cascabel, again, it really much depends on the way that the question would be worded. If it's a banning on mining in a specific district, that is the only option for Cascabel to operate in, then yes, de facto, it is a very strong opposition to the project and will prevent it from moving forward unless there's an additional vote to actually change this. But again, the way I see it is that right now all this fight is being carried out at the legal level, looking at whether a question is deemed constitutional, or whether there's actually the type of regulation is actually adequate for the property itself. But it doesn't move away from the key issue here, which is trying to have a type of relationship with neighboring communities that would allow a project to be sustainable in its investment for the longer term, even if the question is still unconstitutional, or if the way that it will be rephrased would actually hamper Cascabel, but Cascabel is able to move forward. The key issue is to try to be able to find some common ground with the communities and being able to show that mining is actually a potential vector for creation of local values for those communities. And that's where probably mining companies operating in Ecuador are working not ahead of the curve, but are a little late on the game here of trying to be able to engage communities and explain to them that those votes actually will just limit the capacity for economic development down at the local level, and that mining investments are meant to also try to develop and harvest existing resources, but for the well-being of the communities living nearby the project.
And how well do you think that the mining companies have been getting that message across, given the opposition that's appearing?
Well, the thing is, you have a very diverse type of companies operating in Ecuador. You have probably, if you try to rank them on a spectrum, on the best case practices have often been implemented, developed and implemented by Lundin at their Fruta del Norte project, and then a series of key executives in Lundin, and Nathan Monash has done a very good job of developing a series of key projects to try to gather support from the communities. Those projects are actually, or those initiatives has been vetted as key, as receiving a series of different awards from the United Nations of how you have to carry extractive industries project, but keeping in mind the sustainability of the local development and the support from the communities. On the other hand of the spectrum, you have a series of projects. Right now, the larger project is the Mirador project, which is being developed by Chinese interests that received an agreement under the Korea administration. And that specific project is known for not taking into account a series of needs from the local communities. It has led to a state of emergency, if I'm not wrong, that was in 2016 at the time. So you also have a very negative image of the mining sector, on which mining companies in Ecuador are working hard to try to reverse. And all in between Fruta del Norte on one hand and Mirador, you have a series of mining companies, some of them being at the exploration level, others are being at the, let's say, little further forward in terms of moving towards potential production in the next 2 to 5 years. All these, each companies, you have to assess them one by one on how they've been able to address those issues of being accepted by communities and trying to find common ground for collaboration. Here again, the key element is always to try to work as early in the cycle as possible, and so not arriving for early exploration without already talking and engaging communities and being able to make the case that the development of a mining project can be in the best interest of not only the overall country of Ecuador, but also the local communities that will actually gain key competencies and be able to use this as a vector of local progress.
Okay, and so just finishing up with Ecuador, do you think that the mining companies have the, do you think that the government has the mining companies back? I mean, only just last week, the Ministry for Energy released a study talking up Cascabel and its potential for the economy. Do you think that they are fully supportive of mining?
Yeah, I mean, you do have support, obviously, from the Ministry of Mining or Ministry of Energy in that case. And that's actually one of the issues that you have in Ecuador is the lack of stability. You had a series of change of ministers from Javier Cordova to then Rebecca Illescas, and then the mining ministry then became merged again with the energy ministry. So it's a little bit complex to get a clear grip of who to talk to and understand that there's actually right now, because it's being merged inside the energy ministry, the key minister, which is Perez, is more of energy mining, as a former Aliberton executive, than understanding the complexity of mining. So you can't just use one solution for the energy sector and just apply it to the mining sector. But still, what we're seeing indeed is an evolution, and a positive evolution from the Ecuadorian government that has probably misunderstood the importance of those local votes, hasn't clearly stated its support to the mining sector. That was again in Ecuador 3 weeks ago for a conference, and that was the key element and key point that we were making to the ministerial authorities of trying to be more adamant about the potential, the positive of mining for the overall country. Now, you still have, even within the government, obviously you have ministries that look much more at, environment, or look more at social inclusion, that might not be as supportive as the Ministry of Mining, which is completely normal Ministry of Energy in that case. But the key here is to try to get both at the head of state, so the Lenin Moreno level, a key statement of what is the capacity for mining companies to operate, so stability for investor, but more importantly, as I was mentioning, to work on project and property per property, of explaining, profiling what are the different communities, understanding what they would actually suffer from when in the case of a large open pit project, or what benefits they could get from each one of those projects, and build cooperation and alliances of interest around the mining site. And I'm not sure all mining companies are doing this the way that they should do in Ecuador.
Okay, and so moving on to neighboring Colombia, mining companies there have also been running into troubles with the opposition to their projects, including a major gold producer, AngloGold Ashanti. What can you tell me about the situation in Colombia? How is it different from Ecuador, or is it roughly the same story?
Well, you do have the same trend of increased importance of above the ground risk compared to risk, let's say 5-10 years ago, that were much more centered on geological risk, operational risks. Definitely across Latin America and most jurisdictions in the world, the above the ground risk, social opposition to projects are essential to understand and be able to move forward to developing a successful and a project with high return on investment for the company. Now, in the case of Colombia, you're seeing indeed the same kind of wave, which did not actually originate in Ecuador. You had the same similar local opposition and referendum in Argentina, in Guatemala, in a series of Latin American countries, especially because most of those countries also are signatories to the ILO 169 ruling, or basically that actually demand a consulta previa with indigenous communities that give them a specific position and legal position on this. So you do have this all across Latin America. In the case of Colombia specifically, and that's why it's so important to understand the structure of each country. In Colombia, what's interesting to look at is that the power of regional authorities is very important, and regional stakeholders. If you want to operate in Antioquia, for example, you need to be able to have the support of key actors in the economic circle or political circle in Antioquia, and not only rely on the support of authorities in Bogota. You mentioned AngloGold Ashanti. AngloGold Ashanti has a project right now in Quebradona, where they've done very strong progress, and they really improve their approach to the communities, making, and when you look at data and the different survey that has been done in the city of Jericho, for example, you're seeing that there's more and more let's say progressive stance by AngloGold Ashanti to showcase how this could be a development for the local communities. You still have strong opposition from different, let's say, economic interests in Antioquia, but you're seeing here probably a best case practice of how you can turn around a project. You're seeing also in the case of Minesa, that's another province in case of Santander, a series of opposition from the local communities to the project. Again, in all those projects, the issue is to understand what are the vectors of progress for communities, what are the reason and who's behind different movement of opposition, and understanding that you do not fight those battles at the level of the capital and the level of the government, but much more at the level of the community levels and potentially regional authorities, to try to build those coalition of interests and alliances, both economically, socially, and politically. But then you need to have boots on the ground and clear people that can help you understand what are the vectors of collaboration and progress for them.
Okay, fantastic. So some great advice for operators on best practices. Well, there's some very interesting thoughts on the development and future of the mining industry in some select Latin American countries. So we're going to wrap it up there, but you've left us with plenty of homework to do to get up to speed on Latin America. Thank you for joining me, Remi. It's been a great chat. Hopefully we'll be able to chat again sometime soon in the near future about what's going on in Latin America, because the news never stops.
Absolutely, and feel free to reach out to us at America's Market Intelligence. We're here to provide support to investors, and obviously to anyone that wants to better operate at the local level and national level in Latin America.
And that was Remi Piet, Senior Director at America's Market Intelligence. I'm Scott Tibbles with the Investing News Network. You can find us at investingnews.com and feel free to follow us at Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.